Am I the asshole because an employee died after I fired her? Throwaway account. And #X200B. I manage a retail shop in a tourist city. I hired an applicant named Bruce. He had a full-time job, but he was perfect for the 16-ish hours I was looking to cover. Months later I was looking for seasonal help. Bruce recommended his roommate, a woman with a medical assistant background named Sally. Around the holidays a lot of people step outside their chosen fields to earn more money. Sally's references checked out and I hired her. Sally's training period was uneventful. During that time I learned she had type 1 diabetes. We worked out a break schedule so she could eat test whenever she needed. It wasn't a hardship to accommodate her. Her performance was disappointing. When asking for ID with credit cards she would make comments like, "You gained so much weight since this picture, this says you're blonde. Your hair is blue. I can't accept this." She would argue about tasks saying she's a cashier and isn't paid enough to sweep the floor or tidy up merchandise. The job role specified both tasks. She didn't accept feedback gracefully. I told her her employment was in jeopardy. Bruce calls me. They are now married. They sped up the relationship because she needed the health care and he needed her to be on the lease of his apartment. On my end, all I had to do was have them sign liability waivers and schedule them apart. A few weeks later I get a customer complaining Sally denied him service because she didn't like his tattoos. A second customer calls to complain that not only did Sally deny service because of tattoos but she pulled down her pants to show him a tattoo on her backside. On camera I find Sally mooning the customer. I typed up a termination notice and fired her. She refused to sign it or take a copy. I treated the situation as any other, stuck to, she is no longer with the company. If asked. And #X200B. Bruce didn't quit. But he got angry at me not long after. Sally had applied for a hospital job and was denied because I gave a bad reference. No one had called me for a reference. Sally told him I fired her for being messy and combative about breaks. This is not true, but I can't tell Bruce that. Unless Sally signs a disclosure I can't share any details of her employment termination with anyone. And #X200B. I called the hospital that denied Sally. The HR department told me that they had an application from her but had not reached out for references as she was not being considered. What I infer from this is, Sally lied to Bruce about why she was fired and then when the job search went bad she told Bruce I was ruining her prospects. Soon after Bruce calls, he'd been trying to call Sally but she didn't answer. He went home from his other job and found her dead, complications from diabetes. Bruce quits. He says she would still be alive if I hadn't fired her or sabotaged her, that I am the reason his wife is dead. I didn't tell him she lied to him. I don't see any way that would help him with his grief. And #X200B. Am I the asshole? Holy shit, what a roller coaster of a story. Not the asshole. Rip Sally, but she's the asshole in this situation. Not the asshole. A healthcare system that makes staying alive conditional on employment is the asshole. Not you. Info. How would her having a job keep her alive? If she was getting healthcare through Bruce, then shouldn't her healthcare needs be addressed? Not the asshole. Bruce is mourning and he's lashing out. You are not responsible for her health or the complications that arose from it. You didn't sabotage her and she deserved to be fired. Many people want someone to blame when a loved one dies, but his accusation isn't rational. Info. Now that she is dead, can you go to Bruce and share what happened? I'm asking legally, because him calling you a murderer can be considered slander. Okay. Sally's weird behavior was probably due to her not taking care of her diabetes properly. My mum had a neighbor like that. The neighbor had diabetes, never followed her diet, ate sugar, etc. She had limited feeling in her feet. Mum heard her screaming at her landlord outside one day. She was also super argumentative with a simple, "good morning," from anyone. My niece's husband has diabetes, takes care of himself, sugar level testing, doctor appointments, on the diet, etc. I'm sure Sally didn't take care of herself. Not the asshole. Rough and emotional, but as written I don't see how it's your fault. Not the asshole. The way this is written, I don't even understand why you would think so. NTA. But clarifying the situation won't help either. Best to wash your hands of the whole mess and ignore it. Info. Did you give her the diabetes that killed her? If you didn't make her diabetic, then not the asshole. I'm so sorry for the loss. You're not the asshole. Her actions got herself fired. It's a really sad situation, but you aren't at fault at all. Not the asshole, but that's an awful story to read. I'm not going to judge you, but be aware that employers can only ask if you would rehire or not rehire. Also, the nursing employer should not have shared as much information as she did. By law, you cannot share why you didn't hire a person. I know it's done, but it shouldn't be. I am starting to wonder how you think you're the asshole in this situation, lol. Info: her husband quit over group text to the other coworkers, right? Didn't the coworkers witness her being an awful employee? Do you know if anyone told him that before or after her death, and vouched for you? I'm wondering how much he's actively ignoring the truth. Not the asshole: none of this was your fault. You can't keep such a poor employee that is so completely inappropriate. Not the asshole: and I think you know that. Obviously firing Sally has nothing to do with her death. I'm sorry. Being a manager is hard. Not the asshole: her health complications didn't have anything to do with you. This sub is so stupid. Who would anyone say anything other than NTA? Not the asshole: you handled everything like a pro. You were her employer, not her mother. Not the asshole: there is no way this is your fault. I'm sorry you have to handle this. Bruce is probably just trying to find someone to blame. These complications by no way should have been cause on whether she was employed or not. Not the asshole: tragic story indeed, but you weren't asshole, you gave her every chance. It was her own actions that got her fired. Not the asshole: you, in no way, were the cause of her death. You didn't do anything to cause her to die. You didn't maliciously do something to cause her to die. You are not responsible. You fired her in the professional manner for her bad behavior and her selective customer assistance. Aren't you able to disclose why she was really fired now to Bruce since she passed away, or is it still legality? Not the asshole: seems like Sally had a lot of issues, but none were related to you. Diabetes is a bitch of a disease, but her death had nothing to do with you. Not the asshole: I'm sorry you are going through this. She would be alive if she took responsibility for her actions. Obviously not the asshole. I think you're probably just looking for some affirmation here. Not the asshole: Sally sounds like a horrible person. But I'm curious, I am a type 1 diabetic and have never needed any special accommodations, like extra breaks to test my blood sugar. It takes about 5 seconds to do so and 10 seconds to drink a juice if it's low. Was she particularly bad about managing her disease? It also strikes me as odd that she would just suddenly die due to complications. Was she in DKA? Did she just not take insulin? I really am just curious. Not the asshole: you bear no responsibility here. I've had employees that were not too great at their jobs, but at least minimally competent and would at least try, and I went to great lengths to keep them on because they would end up homeless or dead without them. Others I've had in the same situation who didn't give a shit and thought they were above the work itself. They were disrespectful to me, coworkers, clients, etc. It sucks having to fire people, but there is only so much you can do before their behavior threatens the company, and by extension your job as well as that of their coworkers. Not the asshole: she was underperforming at her job and she suffered the consequences. She then lied to her husband about the circumstances. None of that is on you. Not the asshole: I'm sorry for Bruce's loss and understand that he's lashing out in his grief, but you had nothing to do with this. The only way you would be the asshole in this story is if you didn't fire her after showing her ass to a customer, unless you're running a strip club. It looks like, from the info, you're in the clear. If I had an employee like that, I'd follow the same steps you did and fire them, keeping it professional. Are you looking for an verdict based of your professional ethics, or are you maybe struggling with your humanity here? Doesn't look like you could have stopped Sally from dying. Doesn't seem like sharing confidential details would help Bruce through mourning. I think you know the outcome, even if it's not sitting well with you. Not the asshole: type 1 diabetic here. I have had diabetes for 18 years and I can promise you, this is in no way your fault. If she died because of complications, she died because she did not take care of herself and it had nothing to do with you. Diabetes doesn't make people jerks and terrible workers, that was just unfortunately her attitude. And #X200B. Not the asshole X1 billion. Clearly not the asshole, to the point I'm confused as to why this is here. Did everything right, and while it's awful that a person died, it's not connected to any bad behavior on OP's part. Not the asshole. Sad, but death doesn't make someone a saint. Actually gonna say you did her a solid by not telling the dude about the lie. Not the asshole she died due to complications of diabetes. You had nothing to do with her having diabetes. Not the asshole. And not to speak ill of the dead, but if Sally had carried out her job without being a liability, then she would have still had a job. She could have gone in her sleep, walking through a park on her way to work, opening the store on her own, closing the store on her own. There is no way that you are responsible for her death. This is a medical incident. Harsh story all around, but I have to say that you're definitely not the asshole, Op. It's unfortunate what happened with Sally, but with everything else going on there, it's better to let that whole situation go and move on. Nothing you could say to Bruce would appease him at this stage. Not the asshole. On the plus side, her death may release your confidentiality obligations and you can tell Bruce the truth. Check your local employment laws. You seem like a very level-headed and professional person. It appears that you sew everything by the book and do it without emotion. You are not the asshole because you are doing the job you get paid to do. What people do is their own business and they have to accept consequences. It's unfortunate that Sally died, but your actions certainly can't be causation, nor correlation, because she was clearly lying to save face. Everything is unfortunate except for how you handled her termination. You did what you had to do as a manager. Not the asshole. I just wanted to say, now that she's dead, you could probably disclose why she was fired. Things like that usually don't extend beyond death. R.I.P. Sally. Wow. You couldn't make this shit up. I know when people die they're somehow magically washed of all of the bad things they did in their lives, but what a piece of work. Not the asshole. Her death is sad, but it was on her. Not the asshole. I'm sorry her choices led to her untimely demise, but they were her choices. No mate, you're good, don't even think about it. Not the asshole. You just did your job. And while it's unfortunate that she passed away, I don't even see the correlation to you firing her then her dying. If she is dead now, maybe you are free to give him the severance papers. That would only be to settle your own mind and maybe Bruce's. Not the asshole. She sabotaged herself. I'm glad that he quit. None of this is your fault. You were put in a bad position and you maintained professionalism and integrity. There's every chance that Sally would have passed regardless of whether you fired her or not. Not the asshole.